Sometimes all that weighs on us is not the world, but the way we try hold it. Imagine waking up early, opening the window, and realizing that the day is already happening. Without asking permission, air enters, light touches objects, the distant sound of the city moves alone. Nothing requires effort. Still, inside, something insists on squeezing, organizing, control. It is in this silent contrast that a simple sentence can change everything. It's not about thinking better, nor about overcoming difficult emotions. It's about letting go of your fist-closed mind. There is a short, almost discreet phrase that when touched, thought changes the emotional climate like a breeze changes the surface of a lake. Without fight, no technique, no grandiose promise, just a smooth weight shift internal. Maybe you're tired of trying to calm down, tired of methods, of advice, of long explanations. Fatigue arises when we believe that we need to do something to deserve peace. But what if peace wasn't a prize? What if it was just the natural state that returns when we stop interfering? Think of water flowing between rocks. She doesn't decide the path, does not analyze obstacles. She simply gives in, and when she gives in, she continues. Within us, emotions too seek passage. When they encounter resistance, they become tension. When they find space, become movement. The sentence we are going to go through today does not push emotions to out. She makes room for them to pass. When listening to it, something curious happens. The body responds before the mind. Shoulders drop a little, breathing slows down. The heart stops arguing, not because it was convinced, but because he was not challenged. There is an ancient intelligence to it, a wisdom who doesn't scream. Maybe now it's just curiosity. All good. Curiosity is already an open door. No force understanding. Don't try to apply anything. Just allow the next words find the right place, like leaves landing on water. When the mind relaxes, the feeling assume. And it is in this silent feeling that change begins without announcement, without effort, like the dawn. Breathe, listen, and remain present for a few moments now, in silence. If you feel like there is something invisible guiding your days, even when everything seems confused, this video is for you. Not to learn something new, but to remember what already I knew before I tried to control everything. Stay here. Walk slowly with me. The phrase will come in right time. There is a tiredness that does not come from the body. It appears even after a whole night of sleep. A tiredness that settles into thoughts, emotions, the way we react to everything. It's the tiredness of trying too hard inside, trying to understand what we feel, trying to control how we feel, try not to feel what we feel. From an early age, we learn that emotions need to be managed, that anger must be contained, that fear must be overcome, that the sadness needs to pass quickly. So the mind turns into a control room that never rests. Evaluate, correct, compare, judge. And the more you try to organize your internal world, the heavier it becomes. Maybe you recognize this. One thought arises, and then another appears to explain it. An emotion comes, and the question immediately arises, why am I feeling this? Before, even if we feel it, we are already analyzing it. Before we even take a breath, we're already trying to improve. This is how effort begins, not in what happens, but in resistance, silent to what happens. The curious thing is that no one taught us how to do this consciously. It almost happens alone, like clenching your teeth in the face of a problem. How to tense your shoulders without perceive. The mind closes to protect itself, but ends up creating tension. What was just an emotion becomes a problem. What was just a moment becomes a weight. And then we look for solutions, more explanations, more methods, more adjustment attempts internal. But we rarely question the very idea that something needs to be adjusted. We rarely stop to notice that suffering doesn't just come from what we feel, but the way we try to deal with it. Imagine holding sand in your hands. The harder you try not to let it fall, the more it slips through your fingers. Emotions work in a similar way. They don't like pressure. They don't respond well to force. When they are squeezed, they spread. When they are pursued, they run. When they are fought, they multiply. Emotional effort creates constant noise, a sound background of concern, expectation, and self-demand. Even in good times, something remains alert, like if tranquility needed to be watched, so it didn't disappear. So even calm is tiring. Maybe that's why so many people say, my mind doesn't stop. It doesn't stop because it was trained to monitor, correct, anticipate, to try to stop something from getting out of control. But the inner life, it was not made to be controlled like a machine. It looks more like the weather. At Yao, sometimes cloudy, sometimes open, always in motion. When we don't understand this, we start to fight against ourselves. And this fight is silent, daily, exhausting. It does not leave visible marks, but it consumes energy. Little by little, the simple act of existing becomes heavy. This is where something needs to change. Not outside, but in the way of relating to what happens inside. Not with more effort, but with less. Not with quick answers, but with space. Before any sentence, before any new idea. It is important to recognize this. Maybe you are not tired of life. Maybe you're tired of trying to control her from the inside all the time. And when this perception arises, even if only slightly, something begins to loosen, as a knot that realizes it no longer needs to be pulled, like a sigh that happens on its own. If you want, we can move on. There is a simple sentence waiting, not to solve emotions, but to remove the weight of the effort that keeps them trapped. Now come closer, not with expectation, but with presence. Because the phrase that let's play here doesn't work as an idea to be understood. She doesn't ask agreement, does not require repetition. She doesn't want to be used. It acts as an internal gesture, almost imperceptible, such as slightly changing body position after a long time sitting. The phrase is this: let it be. The mind's first reaction is usually to be surprised. Leave what? Being how. The mind wants to complete, define, explain. But this sentence is not open to reasoning. She is not a command nor advice. It is a permission, and permissions don't need details. When you hear let it be, something curious happens. The mind tries to hold it, but it doesn't find where. There is no clear instruction to execute. There is no goal. There is no result promised. Then, for a moment, the control mechanism becomes ineffective. And in this small interval, the body understands it first. Let it be does not mean giving up. It doesn't mean ignoring problems. Doesn't mean passivity. It means interrupting for a moment the impulse to interfere. It's like taking the remove cloudy water and allow the dust to settle on its own. Clarity doesn't come because it stirred less. It comes because you stopped shaking. The most important thing is to realize that this phrase does not confront emotions. She doesn't say, calm down, nor change, nor get over it. It doesn't argue with what you feel. It just removes the opposition. And when there is no opposition, emotion ceases to be a field of battle and become a movement again. Think of the wind passing through a curtain. He doesn't push violently. He passes because there is space. Let it be creates this space. Not outside, but inside. It's not something that you do. It's something you stop doing. Many sentences fail because they try to convince the mind. Not this one. She gets around it, drains around the edges of thought. It does not require faith, because it offers no explanation. Does not require practice because it requires no effort. It works precisely because it is not opposed to anything. You may be anxious and say, internally, let it be. Anxiety doesn't go away immediate, and that is essential, because the phrase was not created to eliminate emotion, but to eliminate resistance to it. And without resistance, emotion loses density, as a cloud that remains in the sky, but it no longer gets so dark. The emotional brain responds well to this because it doesn't feel threatened. There is no order. There is no fix. Just space. And where there is space, the internal system reorganizes itself alone. How the body finds balance when it stops contracting. Maybe now you are expecting some effect. Note this too, and gently let be. Even expectation can rest. This phrase is not for special moments. It is for the common moment, to the middle of thought, to the middle of the reaction, to the middle of life happening. The less you try to use it, the more natural it becomes. Like a slow exhale that doesn't need to be controlled. If this idea resonates with you, not as understanding, but as silent relief, it is a sign that something inside already recognizes this path. There's nothing to do now. Just remain. In the next step, we will observe what happens when the resistance actually falls. not in theory, but in felt experience. When the resistance drops, there are no fireworks. There is no advertisement. What happens? First, it is almost invisible. A subtle change in internal rhythm, like when you realize suddenly that he was holding his breath without noticing it, and then he lets it out. No because someone ordered it, but because the body recognized that it could now. By saying, "Let it be," something stops pushing inside. It's not that the thoughts disappear. They keep coming. The difference is that they no longer encounter a wall, pass like clouds crossing a sky that doesn't try to hold them back. And that changes everything. The body is the first to respond. Muscles that were slightly contracted relax without command. The jaw loosens. The forehead loses tension. The heart, which once seemed explain more each sensation, reduces the tone. Not out of obedience, but out of relief. It's like if someone had taken away a task he had been trying to complete for hours. Emotionally, something similar happens. The emotion that seemed too great begins losing shape, not because it was fought, but because it stopped being fed by resistance. Emotions grow when they are denied or pressured. When they are permitted, follow their own cycle. They arise, they transform, they pass. There is a curious moment in this process, an instant in which the mind tries to regain control. She asks, "Is this right? Am I doing it the right way? Will this work? Note this kindly." And once again, let it be. Even doubt can rest. The human internal system was designed to self-regulate. Just as the body knows, heal a cut without conscious instructions, the emotional field knows how to reorganize itself when it is not interrupted. The problem was never feeling. The problem was trying to manage the feel like it was a mistake. When resistance drops, time changes texture. The present moment expands. No because the world has slowed down, but because the mind has stopped racing ahead. There is more space between one thought and another. And in that space, something rare emerges. Clarity without effort. This clarity does not come in the form of answers. It comes in the form of enough silence to that answers are no longer urgent. Many worries simply lose strength because they no longer find tension to support themselves. Like echoes in a valley that dissipate when there is no more screaming. It is important to say, letting go is not a permanent state. The mind will try to control again. Emotions will tighten again. This is not failure. It's nature. The difference now is that you recognize the gesture, and you can return to it as many times as necessary, without billing. Every time resistance drops, even for seconds, the body learns. Learn not to needs to fight to survive emotionally. Learn that allowing is safe. Learn that internal silence is not absence, but profound presence. And something even more subtle begins to happen. You start to trust your internal flow more. No, because everything becomes easy, but because you realize that you don't need to carry everything in your hands all the time. Some things resolve themselves when you don't get in the way. This experience is not mystical. It's intimate. It's everyday. It could happen now while you listen. It may happen later, at an ordinary time. Whenever the impulse, if control arises, there is a gentle alternative. Let it be. In the next step, let's look outside, to nature, not as a distant metaphor, but as an exact mirror of that same movement that happens inside. Because what it regulates itself in you, it regulates itself in the same way in the world. Observe nature for a moment, even if only with your imagination. Not a river needs to be convinced to go around a rock. He does not argue with the obstacle. Don't he asks if he should be there. He simply finds his way through. Not because it's strong, but because it does not resist the movement itself. Inside you, the functioning is the same. When the mind stops interfering, the emotional system follows old, more wiser than any recent strategy. Nature does not force balance. It allows adjustments. A branch gives way to the wind so as not to break. A cloud breaks up when it has already served its time. Nothing sticks to its previous form. The emotional brain works like an ecosystem. Thoughts are like birds that land and depart. Emotions are like climates that cross the internal landscape. When we try to fix a state, constant happiness, permanent calm, we create the same mistake as those who try to prevent winter. Resistance breeds rupture. Notice how the fog doesn't struggle to disappear. When the sun comes up, she just dissolves. There is no conflict between light and fog. just changing conditions. Same. However, when you let it be, it creates different conditions. Don't push the emotion out. It just changes the internal environment where it exists. Water is a perfect example of this. She has no opinion on the path. If you find an unevenness, flow. If you find a container, rest. If it finds heat, it evaporates. She doesn't need to decide. Just respond. Emotions also respond when they are not pressed. In the forest, leaves fall without apology. They don't try to stay green for attachment. They fall because it's time. The ground receives them. Time changes them. What seemed like the end becomes food. Inside you, old emotions can also become fertile soil, if you don't, are forcibly removed. When you say let it be, you act like the forest. Does not correct the cycle, does not accelerate decomposition. Trust that the process knows what it is doing. This drastically reduces wear internal, because you stop placing yourself as the manager of each sensation. There is something deeply reassuring about this. You don't need to watch everything. No need PR watch every reaction. You don't need to anticipate the next emotional state. Just like the nature adjusts itself without supervision, your internal world also knows how to reorganize itself. The pleasure that arises from this realization is silent. It's not euphoria. It's relief. It's the rest of who finally realizes that they don't need to support the sky with their hands. The mind learns little by little, which you can observe without interfering. This mirroring of nature awakens something ancient in human beings, a memory of when we weren't trying to explain everything, when feeling was enough, when to be present it didn't require performance. By aligning yourself with this rhythm, you begin to notice small changes in your daily life. The reaction takes a little longer to emerge. Emotion has space before it becomes action. And in this space, natural, not forced, choice is born. It's not that the challenges disappear. It's just that you stop being hardened in front of them. How to water, you pass. Like the wind, it passes through. Like light, it touches without holding back. In the next step, let's bring this to the most challenging terrain of all. Life. Modern. The noise, the charges, the screens, the conflicts. And we will see how this same simplicity works there, without needing isolation, absolute silence, or radical change. Now bring all of this to the place where it often seems most difficult, the average day. Oh, cell phone vibrating, slow traffic, the message that didn't come, the crossed answer, a silent charge of having to take care of everything. This is where emotional effort often reappear with more force, and it is precisely here that let it be reveals its most subtle subtlety. Powerful. Imagine being stuck in traffic. The body already recognizes the situation as a threat to the control. Thought accelerates. Irritation begins to form even before you perceive. At this moment, there is no time for deep reflection, but there is room for one almost invisible internal gesture. Let it be. Not to accept delay as a good thing, but to stop fighting the fact that it is already happening. Something changes. The grip doesn't grow. The mind does not need to justify anger. She just passes by, like a smaller wave than it would be. The moment remains what it is, but you don't add extra weight to it. On social media, the same movement happens. An image awakens comparison. One comment generates discomfort. The impulse is to react, defend yourself, explain yourself internally. Let it be. Doesn't stop the initial feeling, but it stops the spiral. You don't need to resolve everything in that instant. Emotion can exist without becoming identity. In difficult conversations, this phrase acts even more silently. Before responding, before closing, before justifying itself, something inside loosens. You listen better. No because he tried hard to be calm, but because he stopped resisting the discomfort of moment. The answer that emerges from this is usually simpler, more honest, less loaded. At night, when the body lies down and the mind insists on reviewing the day, planning tomorrow, redoing dialogues, the phrase finds another role. Not to silence thoughts, but to remove the urgency. Thinking is no longer a task to be completed. It becomes just mental activity passing by. And without pressure, sleep finds space. The most interesting thing is that let it be does not require constant repetition. She doesn't need to be remembered all the time. It just needs to be available. Like a door you know can open when the air becomes heavy. The more you trust that you don't need to use its strength, the more naturally it appears. Modern life will not slow down because of you. The demands continue. The challenges emerge. The difference is in not turning each stimulus into an emotional test. You begins to respond more than react. And this difference changes the quality of the days. There is pleasure in that. A discreet but profound pleasure. The pleasure of not always being in war with yourself. The pleasure of feeling without getting lost. The pleasure of realizing that neither everything needs to be resolved now. If you look closely, you will see that many moments resolve themselves when you don't interfere. Emotions dissipate. Thoughts reorganize. Decisions mature. All of this happens without planning, when you don't get in the way. This application does not make you indifferent. On the contrary, you become more sensitive because you're not busy defending yourself all the time. Life touches, and you allows touch without stiffening. If this idea begins to make sense not as a theory, but as a real possibility in your day-by-day, it's because something inside has already realized the value of this simple gesture. In the next step, let's integrate all of this, not as a technique but as a way of being in the world. 1. Return to the center, where control gives way to silent harmony. There comes a time when you realize that you are no longer trying all the time. No because you decided to stop, but because something inside relaxed enough to not need to insist. It's a silent return to the center, like when you walk for a long time in tension and, without realizing it, he adjusts his posture and remains lighter. This state is not the absence of challenges. Life continues to bring questions, uncertainties, unexpected changes. The difference is that you no longer take a stand against all of this. Control, which previously seemed necessary to survive emotionally, begins to lose protagonism, and in its place comes something more stable. Trust in the flow. This confidence is not an optimistic belief. It's a bodily sensation, a recognition that you have already gone through many difficult times without needing to control each step, that something in you knows how to adapt when you're not pressured. When control gives way, the internal intelligence gains space. You start to notice this in small choices, the pause before responding, the silence which does not need to be filled out, the decision that matures alone, without anxiety. There is no effort to be balanced. Balance happens because there is no struggle. At this point, let it be stops being a remembered phrase. She turns into an implicit attitude, an internal disposition not to anticipate what has not yet happened, of not squeezing what is already alive. Not to turn every emotion into a problem. The harmony that emerges from this is not perfect, but it is real. She lives with discomfort without disorganize. It allows for sadness without excessive drama, allows joy without attachment. Everything circulates. Nothing needs to be withheld. There is an emotional maturity in this state, not the rigid maturity of someone who controls all the time, but the flexible maturity of someone who trusts their own rhythm. How a tree that doesn't fear the wind because it knows it can move. By reintegrating this way of being, you do not move away from the world. On the contrary, if you approaches him with less defense, experiences stop being threats and become meetings, even the difficult ones. And something profound happens. You begin to enjoy simply being present, not because everything is pleasant, but because you are no longer fighting with the moment. Now it stops being an obstacle and becomes a floor. This reintegration is not an endpoint, it's a continuous movement. There will be more days tension, fewer days. The difference is that you recognize the way back. When you notice the tightness, you know you can let go. Whenever you feel the urge to control, you know that may give way. In the next and final step, we will end this crossing. Not with closed conclusions, but with an opening. An invitation for this silent harmony to continue acting after the video ends. Because what really transforms is not what is understood, but what remains vibrating in silence. Maybe now there are fewer words inside, or maybe there are still many. It doesn't matter. What matters is that something has changed in the way they occupy space. They no longer seem push. They no longer require an immediate response. They just pass by, like light steps on a ground that does not need to be explained. Throughout this journey, we do not seek to dominate emotions, nor to understand every detail of the situation. What happens inside? We just remove the hand that was shaking, And when the tightness disappears, the inner life finds its own adjustment. Always found it. We just forget about it for a while. The phrase is too simple to sound powerful. Let it be. It doesn't shine. No promises. It is not imposed. But perhaps that is precisely why it works. Because it doesn't try to replace anything. It just gives back. Space to what you already know how to live in. When you leave this video, the world will still be the world. Demands will not disappear. Emotions will continue to arise. Thought will still try to control, predict, correct. And that's okay. None of this is a mistake, it's just movement. The difference is subtle but profound. Now you know that you don't need to keep track of everything tension. You know you can give in without losing. That you can allow without giving up. What can trust without abandoning yourself? Use this perception like someone walking barefoot, carefully but without rigidity. In a few days it will be clear. In others, distant. Still, it will be there. Like a river underground that keeps running even when the surface appears dry. If at any point you find yourself trying to hold back too much again, remember, there is no need to correct this. Just notice. And gently, let it be. This simple gesture, it can change the entire mood in an instant. If this content has brought you relief, clarity, or inner silence, please consider subscribing and continue walking with us along the path of the soul. Here, we are not looking for answers ready, but spaces where something deeper can emerge. And now, before you go, allow yourself to be still for a few seconds. No expectations. Without conclusion. Just presence. Because perhaps what we call balance is not something to be achieved, but something that emerges when we stop interfering. What if what you call control is just fear disguised as care? And if what you see is the Dhamma of surrender actually an ancient form of wisdom? What if what seems like silence is just the whisper of the kami, accompanying you forever, waiting for the moment when you would finally let it be?